Okay, here we are. We made it to another Wednesday. And I took some notes about what to talk about, but also we had this tweet about people can comment, which I think was a good idea. Should do that more. So I think that is a good. So yeah, one person commented on. Well, I'm not sure if this should have like some more organization or whatever, but I'm just going to just keep doing it kind of randomly, and I'll just talk early on, and then we'll just open it up so whoever wants to talk about whatever they can. But one person asked about plans for future governance structure, how upgrades will be decided. Thank you. And I think this is like a really important thing to explain because BIP 300 is the governance solution. Like, so when Ethereum, in contrast, when Ethereum launched, it was like totally dependent on like Vitalik, and it had to be built. It was completely unfinished, like it didn't exist at all. And so when it was announced, it didn't exist, and then when it launched, it didn't exist, and then it was unfinished for a long time. It's like still unfinished. But BIP 300 is like a completable project, and when it's on, people will be able to add or remove different L2s. The L2s will be able to compete for users. So there will be some governance, but the only governance, so to speak, is which L2s the miner should support. But that is already, I don't want to say it takes care of itself completely, but it almost does, because the miners can easily support many different L2s with minimal involvement from them, and they collect transaction fee revenue from all of them. So they just kind of think, well, I get a lot more money from giving this people a try. It's a pretty big improvement over the existing. Now, the existing situation would be like, Vitalik Buterin running Ethereum or whatever, Eamon Gensira running Avalanche or et cetera, et cetera. And you have to have all this work going into it. But with the idea behind BIP 300 is just people will do the work. People want to do the development work. There's no avenue for that to actually break through. So like when Vitalik tried to do Ethereum, he tried to do it on Bitcoin first. And of course, the Bitcoin Cash people tried to do large blocks on BTC first. So actually, development is not the bottleneck, and it's actually not even that. On a relative basis, it's not that crucial, because it's not. The issue is not development. The issue is like when different developers agree who should win. But with BIP 300, you don't have to do that. So that's a pretty good comment. A bunch of people are asking about Solana eCash token. I posted about this earlier in the week, where the idea, I'm not exactly sure, because you have to weigh a bunch of different things. And but I think there could be something where we would exchange the real token for the for fun sort of Solana meme token, maybe with only like a few people, but they could then exchange it to the great masses of people. So that might be an easy way of getting it done. I'm not sure if that clarifies at all, but it would be like, that would be a fun way to maybe try to get some value into the frivolous version, the fun version. So yeah, we had a bunch of stuff. Mr. Hoddle said that maybe he would join. He tried to join last time. He couldn't because I'd made Vlad the co-host, but let's see, I don't know. We can make anyone the co-host, I suppose. But yeah, we had a really good space last time. It was slow. It's always slow in the first few minutes, but then it picks up, and then usually runs over 4 p.m. One thing, tomorrow we're going to announce our bug bounty contest. Oh, we have someone requesting already. Okay, great. And so that's happening. It's also going to talk about how our software Bitwindow, it doesn't just work with the hard fork, it also works with regular Bitcoin network using the real network and also Signet and Testnet. So people should try it out on that basis alone. I think people don't realize a lot of the cool stuff that's in there. But yeah, we have someone who requested to speak already. So
Hi,
JK, hello.
how you doing? Yeah. No, I guess I was just the only thing I could think to talk about is how a lot of the chains now are just like pivoting to BitVM, which he himself has said is like a worse form of Bit 300 and has said we should activate it. So like I don't know. It's kind of an interesting thing that even all this fancy stuff on like simplicity and which I'm a fan of, but simplicity on Liquid, they're still pivoting towards like BitVM.
That's a very good point, and I think the fact that it's worse actually, when we say worse, we don't mean like, but what we mean is that the creator of BitVM, Robin Linus, he said many times consistently, on Twitter and on recorded video, and he's insisted many times that we should just activate BIP 300. But he made this weird workaround BitVM, and it has many disadvantages. I think the point of BitVM is that it's technically complicated. So unfortunately, we've had this phenomenon in Bitcoin where we have like a bad criterion, and then it redirects everyone's brain power into something that we don't need. And then since monkey see, monkey do, since people copy each other, it creates this mass psychosis on everyone. So it's actually kind of a really big problem. But we were just talking earlier today about silent payments versus BIP 47. BIP 47 is super, super old. There's really nothing wrong with it. But then people would come up with other stuff because they have this weird criterion that you can't. The initial transaction key. I don't know if a lot of people know about this, but there's this cool idea to get rid of addresses in Bitcoin. So you don't need any addresses. You don't have to ask anyone for an address. You don't have to deal with people copy paste trying to steal from you. Super, super old idea. And then basically because of Luke Dash Jr. kind of ruined it because he was saying that because the first transaction is like the first transaction to someone uses like 20% more space. This is like spamming the blockchain or whatever. When really, I think it was nothing of the kind. It was very efficient use of the blockchain to dramatically improve Bitcoin's, utility as money and as a payment network. But that was like 10 years ago. And so now we still have all this stuff, and the point is just to show off that you can do a thing. So the point of it is just to show off how technically impressive you are. And that's the point of it, unfortunately. So we live in a culture where we don't want like the better thing.
I think that they also were like trying to emulate like what they couldn't have on Lightning, and so they like somehow tried like they wanted like recurring payments and things like this, like which I mean you should be able to do that, and there's a million ways to do it, but they just like tried to emulate whatever it is. Like, oh, we wish we could somehow create addresses that have payments sent to them like Bolt 12, but we haven't been able to implement that for years. So we're gonna like do it on the main chain and then uh, also say it's private and stuff like this. I don't know. I mean,
Yeah, unfortunately, I think the Bitcoin, what you might call the Bitcoin technical community as a group, is mostly hostile to Bitcoin. I think maybe without realizing it, but there's a huge conflict of interest between just building something that works and something that works permanently. The last thing they want is to solve the problem permanently, because then you wouldn't need them to like keep working on it. But with something like Lightning, and they can always have more conferences about in exotic locations, and they can always have more conferences about like flood and loot and blah blah blah, and how this is how we would fix, etc. So they kind of want it to be an endless make work program, and unfortunately, it's just part of it's gotten so big that we have such a big food chain, where we have different people. So some are specialists in Lightning, some are like podcast specialists, some are like whatever. And so there's no integrity to the whole thing. Like people don't necessarily care. Like if your job is to just sell a Bitcoin book, you mostly care if people see you as an expert. And if you sell a podcast or if you sell a Bitcoin bar, you don't necessarily care about like, whatever. So the technical community is no exception. It has a lot of people who are just kind of showing off.
one of the things I noticed is that like one of the best use cases I've seen for the Fedimint type style of Chaumian mints is like not even related to money. It doesn't work well as like a currency at all, but using it like in there was something that was put out on like onion routing over Lightning or something like that, but you can totally remove the Lightning part from it, and that I realized is actually where all this software is kind of like built towards in the vein of some network that doesn't contain money, because like they were using these Fedimint eCash style things not to like produce tokens that people would represent as like coins or something like that, but to represent like reputation for spamming and work in lieu of like proof of work, like the Tor network uses. So it's like all of these things just don't factor in economics at all. And if you remove the economics, they kind of function decently, but I don't think that people really consider that.
Yeah, it's like, other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how did you like the play? Um, we have like a whole set of stuff where like there's a whole set of criteria. This is what I was trying to explain before. Like, for example, like with ordinals and with the backlash and with the op return backlash, there's a whole cohort of people who think it's bad if you ever use Bitcoin for anything. So the hatred of consuming block space, or Luke Dash Jr.'s desire to stop anyone from consuming any L1 bytes that they don't absolutely need, that just becomes a deranged hatred of using Bitcoin. It becomes a deranged hatred of, paying the transaction fee revenue to miners. This also happened with sidechains, where people thought if the sidechain pays a lot of money, then miners might want to run it. And since when they run the software, this costs some money, they thought this contributes to mining centralization. And so the argument is, whenever miners can get any more money doing anything, this contributes to mining centralization. And a lot of smart people believe this, even though it literally makes no sense whatsoever, and it's complete nonsense, because you end up just saying like, well, every time the miners are using the heat to heat a swimming pool, or anytime they do the demand management programs, or really anytime the Bitcoin difficulty adjusts upward at all, and we have an increase in the security budget, and we have an increase in the proof of work backing Bitcoin, all those things used to be good, but now, because you have a mistake, you basically, it's like you're doing math and you dropped a -1 somewhere. So these people have like a wrong view. And as a result, it's exactly as you were saying, where people have to evolve away from doing everything cool. Like the cool thing would be if the VPNs and if all this stuff used the actual money-based tokens instead of reputation, because money is kind of like a reputation, but more reliable and more scalable. So all this stuff would work better if it actually had actual money behind it. But instead, it has to evolve away from something useful. It has to evolve towards being useless. So this is just where we are. It's just
Yeah.
there are many examples.
For the centralization stuff of miners, it's like, I mean, the difficulty adjustment in essence is firing like a large percentage of the non-performant miners. So you would expect that the performant miners would not be some like ragtag group, but actually be like specialized at whatever it is they're doing. And so, I mean, I really like the idea that BIP 300 is just making that specialty away from just burning electricity and towards adding concrete value for fees.
Yeah, exactly. There was this like, it's kind of like very easy to sell this notion of, well, hey, anyone can mine. Like, we're all in this together, and even the little guy can mine. It's unfortunate because it kind of sounds a little nice, but it does end up being like some kind of creepy version of communism or whatever, where it's like no matter how underperforming people are, they're not, and it's also completely contrary to the design of Bitcoin, which is the difficulty adjustment every 2 weeks resets it to the average. So everyone who's below average is now unprofitable, and it's very bizarre because it's pretty basic control. It's like a thermostat in your house. As soon as you cross beneath the expected amount, you're out, because this is the only way to measure. Well, Satoshi ingeniously figured out this way of basically measuring the thermodynamic the purchasing power of the blocks, and you having the strength in numbers effect. But yeah, so we have these nice sounding ideas, but they're not true, and they're not like necessary, and they're not. They end up being counterproductive, because what you end up saying is anything that where even if miners earn more money, in fact, especially the argument was, if you could carefully follow it, which is hard, it's very hard to follow because it's a ridiculous argument. But if you can carefully follow it, it was some miners make so much money from the L2 that they might run it, paying a cost that is less than what they're earning, since otherwise they just ignore it. So it's like, oh, they'll get so much money. They're going to be making, it's kind of like a Donald Trumpism or something, where it's like, oh, they're going to be making so much money. They're going to be saying, oh no, how did it ever get so bad for us? It's like, so, and then it flips the whole security budget thing around too, because all this stuff was basic before. We want miners to collect all the fees. We want miners to collect all the transactions into blocks. We want them to collect all the fees. We want them to spend it all on proof of work so that we have high deterrence for doing. All of that was basic stuff that everyone believed. Then it switched, at some point, it switched over to like miners shouldn't do anything. Like miners should just like kind of be ignored. And this idea that they should just timestamp blindly. And I think that's
it doesn't make
incorrect.
It doesn't make any sense, because like practically the only people who are on the pulse of whether or not the network and software is running correctly are the miners. That's why like a lot of people don't know that there are these like private block propagation networks that have to exist. Otherwise you would get way more orphan blocks, and like people just like don't even know. And like Matt Corallo was running it for years and now had to spin it back up. And like miners actually know what is working in the network and with the software at a real tangible level that like even like an economic node doesn't necessarily need to have an understanding of.
Well, ironically, the idea of many like of these Puritan small blocker types, and again, I'm an L1 small blocker, and I was, and I still am. But like some of these people, like a Peter Todd, who think that miners should just blindly timestamp everything, and that they shouldn't care too much about what's happening. This, ironically, they make the exact same mistake that the Bitcoin SV people made, which is that if all you want to do is timestamp it, everyone could already do that. So first of all, you could use something like open timestamps invented by Peter, but you could also just timestamp any other way, and you could even like take the hash of a document and like publish it, take out an ad in the New York Times or whatever, and publish the hash there. This was done. People used to do this, and so if all you want is timestamping, that was always allowed, and you can timestamp an unlimited amount of data in Bitcoin's blockchain. You can hash. You can take Lord of the Rings extended edition, 4K version or whatever, and you can hash that, and you can put the hash in. So if all you want to do is hash, then that's fine. So that was always allowed. The people who want the blind timestamp and they want miners not to know anything, that's fine. But I think that really misses the point of Satoshi's invention. Satoshi's invention was there is a set of data that we have we've commonly all agreed that, we're all going to validate and store and provide and whatever.
But one thing is that
like the required. So you got to make it in the umbrella. That's what I'm saying. So this is like when the people like Peter Todd or whatever, they try to push stuff out of that umbrella, they are just they're missing like the point of the invention. And then they make yet another bizarre mistake where they say that BIP 300 is a block size increase because someone out there might run, the L2 node. But if that's the case, then, Ethereum is a Bitcoin block size increase and Namecoin is a Bitcoin block size increase. And then they have another bizarre argument, like we sort of discussed already, which is anytime mining costs go up, that increases miner centralization. But if that's the case, then every time the difficulty adjusts upward, then. So really none of them have any idea what they're talking about at all. It's really been depressing to learn just how like completely confused and clueless all of them are. And sometimes even on stage, they get asked basic questions so anyway, a lot of confusion out there.
It just seems that like there is a sort of like more fatal flaw that is being ignored in like the cultural or governance level that like prevents something even like CoinNews from being added, which is like a super basic feature, but it just has you have to think about the users more in order to add it.
That's cool. You like CoinNews? I don't know if you and I have like spoken before.
Yeah, we have, yeah, a bit, but
Idea, isn't it? Yeah. It's CoinNews is my idea. It's a completely cosmetic idea. It has no changes to Bitcoin like the protocol, but just to the front end. And I think it's a really, really good idea and it's a lot of fun. And all it does is if you broadcast an op return with, and I had this idea and we implemented this idea long before this op return drama. And we removed the op return standardness limit like maybe back in like 2019. I removed that from we had like our test Drivechain software that we were just tinkering with at the time, not really taking too seriously. But long ago, I was like, this op return limit is irrational and a complete waste of time. So all the people who are if you just learned about it in 2026 and now you have some kind of opinion about it, how it's bad or whatever, then you got a lot of catching up to do, in my humble opinion. But what CoinNews is you broadcast an op return with an unusually large fee, and you have like a little code in the beginning. And again, nothing stops you from doing this now. But what CoinNews does is it breaks apart, it scans and finds all of these messages as they come in, and it sorts them into categories. So you can put them into categories. So you can be like United States, we have like U.S. Weekly, which determines like where they show up and for how long, and like Japan Weekly or whatever. So you can have little categories that people use for mutual convenience, so they don't bump into each other. And then it will sort them based on what fee you paid, and it will display like the little op return stuff. So this is a great way of, if you have some news that you want to announce, it's a super cool idea, and it doesn't involve a soft fork or anything. It's just like a cosmetic thing, and it gives people a reason to run a full node, and makes running a full node kind of fun because you never miss out on the latest news. You don't have that FOMO because you can only get the coin news from the blockchain. So you could theoretically get it from someone else who's running a node, but yeah, it's like a cool thing, and you can see these. Coin news, great idea, perfectly harmless and fun idea.
You'd totally expect stuff like that to be added, though. Like, I mean, like it. So anyway, that I just was pointing out, I guess, that the fact there are no equivalent ideas being talked about or proposed just kind of shows that they're not really like writing in the business of writing software, but yeah, like being like authorities of some sort.
I'm very disappointed. So we also came up with this thing. I came up with this a long time ago. May have been 2019 also. It's called deniability. And the idea of deniability, again, this is not a soft fork. This isn't any kind of dramatic thing. It's just something in the software where it will schedule a bunch. It will automatically, you just click like a button, and it will automatically schedule a bunch of transactions from yourself to yourself. But they'll look in a very convincing way. They'll look like they are someone spending money to other people and making change addresses and stuff. So it looks like you're getting rid of your Bitcoin and that you don't have it anymore. So it's like losing it in a boating accident or whatever. Except on chain, there's really a transaction getting rid of it. So in every single way, it appears as though you sent it away. And you can even like set it to like do this many times, like, while you're asleep, or it will delay random amounts of time. So like you can like click the button and go like walking around town. And if the Russian mafia is following you, or the US government's following you, or whatever it is, they're tracking you via satellite, they can see that you're buying ice cream or whatever and just hanging out at the park. And meanwhile, this money is moving around. It looks as though someone else really has it, and they are spending it, not you. And this is just a completely clever little idea. And of course, it's a good idea and it doesn't harm anyone. So of course, it's not merged into Bitcoin Core. And even my friend Alex K, who holds the patent on Google Autocomplete, he was trying to get it into Bitcoin Core like for years. And I was like, listen, you don't understand. Like, they're just crazy people, and they're not, they don't have any good ideas in. And he tried many times to get it in. And then there were people like Luke. And again, I mostly like Luke, but I just think relying on Luke's opinion is a bad idea because he's very often wrong. And as he was in this case, because Luke was saying, I don't see how that gives anyone any privacy. And it was like, well, it doesn't give you like it doesn't give you any of a certain kind of privacy, but it does give you some, because when the people show up, when the Russian mafia breaks down the door to your house, you can just tell them, I don't have any Bitcoin, I spent it all. And they don't really know that you're lying. Now, does that help? To what extent does that help? A little bit, not completely, because they may not believe you, but it does. It is something, and all it is just a little button you have to click in the software. And we added that also. That's also in Bitwindow, and you can use that. You can use our Bitwindow with regular Bitcoin Core. And yeah, again, this is like something that a lot of people would like, because it is awkward. Like, even when you just get any money from anyone, if you get a large UTXO balance from someone and then you pay someone else, they can see on the blockchain that, oh yeah, this guy paid me out of like a 50 BTC UTXO. They still have 49.999 whatever. So at that point, many people are tempted to say, well, I got to spend this 49 to myself. So it does give me the impression that Luke Dash Jr. doesn't really use Bitcoin for anything. That's the weird thing, is that, like, I think we need feedback from the actual users. The developers should be serving the needs of the users, as should the miners. Instead, I don't know. We've lived through like a 10-year period where just everyone is just virtue signaling, and there's very few people working on problems that actually affect them. And a lot of people just want to be like a superstar working on BitVM, right? Because of course, no one's ever going to use BitVM, so no one's ever going to complain, since it will never have any users anyway.
Yeah, that's a classic trope in the DeFi space. They used to call it dApps, and nobody would use them except the people who made them. Um, but yeah, no, I mean, I think like certain ideas, like even that are controversial, like Shad, and having like these are actually end up being features. Like when you have like, oh, the miner centralization, I think that ends up being a feature, and it's a feature that you can't just add with software. You actually have to make commitments to an entire different chain in order to make them. And I think that any significant change is just what is being sort of like fought against.
Yeah, I have a different theory that I've explained to some people about, like, we're just living through a period of stasis, and people don't like anything new, and they don't want to stick their neck out. And then they also know, like, it's open season, like you get a hunting license for anyone who does anything different, because then you have because when stuff starts to change, every change is inherently like a critique of all the existing people. And so it says, like, well, should we, like, a lot of stuff's going to change as a result. Some people are going to lose status as a result of the change, and then maybe many, many, many people will benefit, but they're not in as much of a, the benefits are diffuse and the costs are concentrated. So,
I mean, aside from those, I guess like opponents of like a fork, like people like, how would you categorize like I don't know, Shinobi or like Cal, any of these people who kind of like are largely just like thought leaders type people who oppose changes? Because like I don't know that that seems obvious as to why you would, you wouldn't necessarily like lose your position of authority or something like that to anybody. But anyway, I don't know. This is more so just like,
well, I think, many of these people, so Shinobi in particular, he was like a chief Drivechain hater for years. So now if Drivechain ever succeeds anywhere, it'll just be, I think, like, very embarrassing for him, and it would, as it should. So he talked a big talk, but of course, none of these people really know anything. Everyone's copying someone else's test. So they get involved at first, and they say, oh, op return is bad, or BIP 300 is bad. And then now they're in too deep, because they didn't want to have to walk it back. So they just hope the idea dies. This is another part of the bias against change, which is if you blockade the change, the experiment is never performed, and then no one is ever proven to be wrong. So that's why it's always a safe option, especially for the cowards.
I think you asked questions, like a series of questions on the mailing list, and like didn't really get any responses, like trying to quiz people and if they actually understood the idea that they were like so against.
Yeah, no, I didn't. And then some people, two people replied, and one person did really well, and then he told me he was actually a supporter the whole time. And then one guy was the Zimmerman guy or whatever. He replied, but he got like everything wrong. So not quite, not everything, but so I was like, hey, test your knowledge. I had like a little blog post about that. But then the more important questions were when it's like in 2022 February, I think, people were talking about this and that, and this came up again, and people said, oh well, we don't want to do drive chains because of mining centralization reason or something. Or but there was again the ZMN guy, and he had phrased it like a really like a bizarre way. So then I kind of jumped in and I was like, oh, but that's not true at all. And then he's like, oh, and then people said, well, we should do Lightning instead. And then I asked like just like two questions or something that were like, actually by the criterion that you used, Lightning is like like 1,000 times worse than Drivechain, actually by your own criterion. And I never got any answer. None of the Lightning people ever answered this question, which later became my blog. 2 months later, became the blog post Lightning Limitations, and that was in 2022. And that was when it was after I did that. Now I'm not saying that I'm the solely responsible, and I'm the only one with a brain around here, and everyone else is a phony. But the timing is that I did that and then published this post, and then they talked about it at Miami Bit Devs for the big
conference.
Conference to a giant room full of people. And then you started to see all these Lightning Limitations panels, and then you had Bitcoin Season 2 or whatever. So, I'm not saying that I'm solely responsible, but timing is really curious.
I have seen that like happen in real time though, that like I or somebody else says an idea and then like literally it could be like an hour later some lightning thing occurs and they bring up this niche point or so. But yeah, I think in general like the methods of communication have even kind of broken down since I've been like following the mailing list and everything else. Like it's just like not really the same level of contributions that ever occur, like the discussions that end up being meaningful. Like you can still go back to like Bitcoin talk, and there's more significant contributions there than anywhere on the mailing list, realistically.
Yeah, I completely agree. Okay, wait, we had someone request auto incentive, I thought.
Yeah.
But I don't know if it worked.
Yeah.
Oh, wait,
Thank
no,
you
here.
for having me. I have
Oh.
just one question. I think you guys know that Bitcoin has some limitations. For example, if you have many UTXOs on your address, which you are able to spend, let's say, 1 Satoshi per UTXO, and you have 500,000 UTXOs in the address, you are not able to spend them at once. And I was wondering if the new fork will increase that. I think it's like 100,000 VBytes per transaction.
You're referring to the dust? I'm sorry, you're talking about if you have many small UTXOs.
Yeah,
then it's
if you have
it's
many small UTXOs, you cannot bind them into a single one by doing only a single transaction. That's a limitation of Bitcoin. I think like Segwit has around 60 something bytes, and the new Taproot has like 57, if I'm not wrong, or something.
I think he's talking about the discount, the witness discount.
No. I think he's talking about, okay, the limitation is a result of the fact that there's only so much space in the block.
Exactly.
And if you want to use the block space, you have to pay for it. So many of the UTXOs are not economical, and the only way to do that is with more block space. So indirectly, BIP 300 does solve that because it lets you escape onto different L2s that have more block space. And that actually, it lets you have blocks, different blockchains that have different block sizes of all different shapes and sizes. And so in that way, we're all using, like, we could use different networks. So like if you had like a political activist would be more interested in like a small block privacy type network, like a Zcash style network. And then maybe with the coffee payments, it could even be the same person. Like there could be like someone who's an activist. They could be paying for coffee using a large block L, something that's like a Bitcoin Cash L2 or like a Solana L2 or like a Bitcoin SV L2, something like that. They could be buying coffee with that, and then 5 minutes later they could be on a different network you know, building their Flocka empire, as they used to call it, on Bitcoin Uncensored. So that is important that we do that, and people complain about that, or they say, "Oh, that's." They say like, "Well, aren't you just cheating by having all these other nodes that are more expensive?" But the thing is, we already have all of that. We already have all of that stuff. So we already have like, you know, like the Solana already exists in the world. So someone's out there running Solana nodes. So if they can do, if it's not forbidden by the laws of physics, then we might as well make it a Bitcoin project. And a lot of people miss that. It's an extremely basic point, I think, but there you go.
Yeah, basically you can spin up to, I think, like 6,000 SegWit transactions for the 4 megabytes block, but that's not enough if you want to, I don't know, maybe develop a game or something on the network, which is completely on chain. So it won't be able to do it.
Yeah, but you know how we will get there, though, is if software continues to improve, if we continue to grow the network and we continue to grow the economy, then will people get better at writing software over time? So, like, I can give you many concrete examples of this. Like, one is that bandwidth used to be the bottleneck back in the first block size war. So bandwidth was the bottleneck resource why we could not increase the block size. But actually, bandwidth speeds have grown so much that just passively, as a result of increased internet speed, bandwidth is not the bottleneck. And I don't know if anyone has even bothered to check this recently, but a different, similar, related situation is that in 2015, the software was having trouble. There was I think, what was that guy's name? I can't remember. It wasn't, he gave a talk that was like the soft underbelly of Bitcoin. And he was an engineer, and this was like, I don't know, early in the Scaling Bitcoin conference era. And they were talking about how it's hard to optimize the software to process all these, download and process all these, something like Peter or something, maybe? I don't know.
Not Amaury.
Sorry, who?
Amaury Sachet. It wasn't.
No. It was a different guy. And I think he was a Blockstream employee, in fact. So they were talking about it's very hard to optimize the software to actually process the existing amount of transactions. But we ran a contest last summer to optimize one of our L2s, and we got it very, very optimized. And you can see the results for yourself. Just another thing to point out is that, like, you know, Solana, when it first came out, they were like, we don't care about decentralization or the node cost. So they were very, very, very ambitious, like what you're talking about, like build a game or whatever on the, you know, super fast block time.
Mempools also. So Solana doesn't have a mempool, so it's a completely different thing.
Right. And so people are pushing the envelope. As a result of pushing the envelope, I think someone told me, like in January 2022, sometime around then, someone told me that like there was only like 1 or 2 actual nodes of Solana, like run by Solana themselves. They were only running the last single node that ever existed. But here's the thing: is they tried that. They probably, you know, they had to cut a lot of corners, take a lot of risks. They probably had to suffer along the way. But then by the time you got to like 2023, the end of 2023, November, I think 2023, I looked it up, and it still cost a lot of money. Like it cost like $18,000 a year to run a Solana full node, and you needed like this huge array of like RAM and stuff. But they, you know, they hired a lot of people, and they hired a lot of PhDs, and computers improved, and so they got it down. You know, there's a pretty big difference from infinity, because something doesn't exist. So what's the cost? What's the cost of Starlink in 1885? You know, the year 1885. It's infinity, because you can't get to space. And there's no internet and there's no stuff. But I think we will get there. To your question of like, will there be just like unbelievably, unbelievably high, large block size or niche or whatever block, you know, a blockchain that could run a game? I don't think we are there yet. But I think we'll get there in like 5 years. Like maybe, like, you know, the more people actually work on the software and the more people actually use the software, more people actually understand the software. This is like what JK was saying, where no one even talks about anything real anymore. It's all just fake stuff, optics, and kissing up to people for more OpenSats grants or whatever. And so no one's even talking about anything real. But if everyone's actually using the stuff and working on the engineering, it will get there eventually, because the hard drives will improve, the bandwidth will improve, the RAM, everything will improve. So the CPU, everything will be improving. And so, yeah, we will eventually we'll get to terabyte sized blocks and et cetera, tiny fraction of a second block times and whatever.
One of the questions like people were asking me about the fork was like eCash was basically that like, oh, what is like the business use case of decentralization? And this is like something that I guess I also found hard to defend in this abstract sense of like they were wondering why even having like I guess the most efficient like implementation I think of having things be decentralized and also having big blocks like which is what BIP300 does, like what is even the purpose of decentralization? And like that's just something that used to be sort of like I guess assumed that like that's the whole goal of the project at the start of it, and I think people selected for Bitcoin because of it. And then it sort of tilted to being like, well, the developers know, and so that's enough. And then I think the developers stopped wanting conversation because they couldn't defend it. But I think the whole point of things like that is that like it's an axiom. You're not supposed to have to defend that fundamental of a basis of the project. And I think like a lot of the things on eCash are changing and adding those and reasserting those fundamental axioms where it's like sometimes you just have to like clear out the people in the room to only the people who actually think and believe that fundamental basis thing. And yeah.
It's a very good point. Unless you wanted to say something, auto incentives.
Yeah, the thing is, in my opinion, the true decentralization for people is just to be sure that they won't lose their money if something happens. That's the first thing. The second thing is for them to be sure that no one will come and say, you're not allowed to spend this because of this. I think those are the only two things the real user is concerned about when he or she is saying decentralization. That's all. The rest, it's up to the devs, I think. So maybe if I go into a coma for 5 years, I must be sure that when I get off the coma, I will have my eCash or Bitcoin or Ethereum or something, just to be sure. And we can do this with two things: open sourcing the code and allowing everybody to, I don't know, to see the information is correct, and if it's not, to be able to fork the chain and do their own stuff. That's the thing.
Yeah, JK, you raise a very good point about like it's very hard to articulate the benefit of decentralization. There's I think there's a number of different reasons for that. One is that people don't want to say it out loud but this is only one. So I think people are sometimes a little too shy when they get to this one, but even though they should be a little bit of shying away from explaining it. But okay, it's kind of a little bit like saying, okay, it reminds me of this joke from The Office. And I don't know, this is The Office season 1, the American version. And there's the healthcare episode. And Dwight is in charge of healthcare, so he cuts it, and then everyone's mad. So he then adds more healthcare, and then he asks people to write down what what like diseases they have, basically, and people are like, "That's confidential." And so it's kind of like this: the people who really need privacy, they have a good reason, but they can't say it out loud because it's a private matter. So for whatever it is. This is an abstract way of kind of talking about it, but you can't ask people, oh yeah, like it's like when the teacher talks to the students and says, oh, are people afraid? Are people afraid to talk to me or afraid to criticize me or whatever? There's like a lot of things that you just kind of can't, they're just difficult to talk about. And the benefit of decentralization is one of them, because the history of trying to make software, cash on the internet, which goes back many years. The issue is that you had stuff like Liberty Reserve, eGold, stuff like that, and Chaumin Digicash, which was like mismanaged. So you had all this other stuff that was like it fell apart for whatever reason. But of course, Liberty Reserve and Eagle, they were shut down like by the U.S. government, and that's part of why people wanted something decentralized, because they didn't want something where it would be didn't want something where it would be. We got Mr. Hoddle here, great, and
caller.
yes, welcome back.
I'm back. I got a couple questions. So,
Okay, great.
you said it was important to have it SHA-256. Can I ask, like, do you have a reason why? Like, why not a different hashing algorithm, or maybe even merge mine with Bitcoin itself? Why go through a lower difficulty to preserve the chain? Like, why not just do a merge mine or a different hashing algorithm?
Well, if you did merge mining, then that would ensure that the coin is not a good competitor, because it has to always keep the host alive.
Well, how do you explain Dogecoin? Dogecoin is merge mined with Litecoin, and I'm pretty sure Dogecoin is the dominant chain there, right? It's not Litecoin.
Yeah, but Dogecoin is helping Litecoin survive.
Oh, so in your case, you don't want to help Bitcoin survive if this is the dominant chain?
I think when people step into the ring to compete, it's it's inappropriate for them to try to help. It's like, what if you wanted to play anything else, like poker, or you wanted to play Warcraft 3 against someone? You're supposed to help your own side win. You're not supposed to like help the other side win. So I think, as far as being a competitor, you would not want to do anything that makes it so that, because think about it, it doesn't actually help anyone. Because even if then the project succeeds, it doesn't, it can't fully succeed and reward the people who believed in it. And then even if the project fails, it was kind of like there was never an opportunity to. Oh, sorry, I hit a button here. Okay, wait, someone else wants to talk.
Are you gonna have like a Bcash, a difficulty adjustment to like at what levels? Like, where do you think you're gonna have enough? Because it's crazy, man. Like, doing a low difficulty in a world where there's already crap loads of ASICs out there, to me, is insane. Like, I don't know how that works. Because at any point, anyone could come on the network and just be the dominant player. And then you got a lot of like shit to deal with at that point. It's like, why not just be like a CPU friendly coin, like some kind of like, like Monero does it or something, if you want the plebs mining, start at a low difficulty, or GPU friendly, I don't know. Just trying to understand why SHA-256.
Well, first of all, I think mostly doesn't matter. So it's kind of like whatever what determines what happens on the chain is the incentives on the chain. So I don't think it will. If all you want is to have 10-minute blocks, that would be fine. But I think SHA-256, one reason why I would just stick to SHA-256 is because it would make it so that all the Bitcoin miners out there, they're not victims if eCash gets really, really big. And whereas if you switch hashing algorithms and the eCash gets really, really big, then all the SHA-256 miners will like lose a ton of money. And I don't really want that to happen. And I don't want them to be thinking about, after it's proven to be a big success, activating BIP 300 on BTC. I'd rather just have them click over.
I see. So it's about the miners. You're worried about the miners. All right.
Well, yeah, the ASIC people invested in SHA-256 hardware.
Right, but I mean, like, how many SHA-256 blockchains are there that they could mine? I mean, back in the day, there were basically all of them, right? And then slowly but surely, you started changing hashing algorithms. And I remember you had Mazacoin that ended up being merge mined with Bitcoin. You had a bunch of them, and none of them, like I remember when Bcash forked away, someone created a site called fork.lol where you could track all the double spends. Like, when you will become the minority chain, you are a much less secure chain. Like if you're talking about incentives, then like why wouldn't, if this got popular, if this ended up getting some kind of volume on an exchange, why wouldn't a large miner try to double like reorg that, you know, the blockchain to whatever, you know what I'm saying, man? Like I just,
Yeah, but you know, so like Bitcoin SV had less than 0.5% of the BTC hash rate.
well, that's because
And really, it didn't.
BSV only had one node. I mean, like who ran a BSV node? Like no one knew anything. No one could sync to chain tip on BSV. That's why exchanges and everybody delisted it.
I don't know why they delisted it. Obviously, I didn't really support Bitcoin SV, but I just know that it had very low hash. It had a very low price, and so it must have had a very low hash rate. But it was SHA-256 mined. So
Yeah, but
I don't think.
Where is it today, dude? Like where?
Well, you don't think that's the reason why Bitcoin SV failed, do you?
Fine.
It's
What
because
about,
of,
all right, say Bcash. What about BCH?
well, BCH changed, but they were SHA-256 mined, and then they made a bunch of changes. I don't know if any of those changes helped them a lot. I absolutely 100% agree that at first you won't know. You'll be kind of flying dark, and you don't know what the real equilibrium difficulty should be. So very, very early on, like when you first launch the project, that will be like a chaotic moment. And I have considered like something where like for the first 3 months, you could like program in something where it's like you can like manually set the difficulty to something under some conditions. And then like after 3 months, it like deactivates or something like that. This has nothing to do with the long run. And this just has everything to do with trying to guess at what the market price will be.
Yeah, but
Actually,
how does an exchange list that? Like, how would it? How many confirmations would you recommend an exchange to consider before a finality? Like how long?
I mean, that
How do
seems
you
like a
get?
spherical
How do you get
question.
demand? Like, how do you get miners mining it if they can't sell it for dollars to pay for the electricity cost?
well, I mean, don't you think you're being like kind of like, it's great to be concerned, but you're like
Yeah,
acting
man,
as though it's like
I'm
Armageddon.
incentivized to see this UTXO as valuable as possible. So, like, you say I'm not a fan, but I am a fan. Like, I think the right thing to do is if you want to do something different in crypto, you should fork Bitcoin's UTXO set, because at least this way you don't get to print your own money. So I think this is the way to do it. Like, I wish more people did it this way. I just
Well, thank you.
I just think that it could be more
But don't you think
valuable.
you're like, maybe you're just kind of assuming it will be like it? So like Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin SV, they were listed for a while, for years on exchanges, and Bitcoin Cash made it to number 2 on CoinMarketCap when it as soon as it debuted in November 2017. So you're acting like this is like a foregone conclusion that it'll be like completely
You had
unreadable.
BCH had Roger Ver, they had Bitcoin.com, they had hundreds of millions of dollars in marketing revenue. Like it was, that was a pretty big thing that they did. They lost a lot of money on that. So yeah, I mean, sure, granted, if you could get it listed on an exchange at a really low difficulty and there's buying pressure there, then all right. But the way it is right now, I'm in the opinion of that it's going to fork and not like nothing's going to happen. Like it's unless you have some kind of plan to fork away and have a viable block reward where exchanges could list it. Like I think it becomes nothing.
Well, first of all, we have an L2 that does let you do the exchange even without. But then also, I've spoken to some exchanges that will list like a few. There are definitely a few that with 100% certainty will list the coin. And I don't know about Coinbase or whatever, if they'll list it on day one. But I barely even started because we just kind of announced it like a few weeks ago, and there's still plenty of months to go, and a lot of people are still just hearing about it for the first time. So I think it's premature to assume either way but I know some exchanges will list the coin. Now the question is, who will be buying the coin? But of course, people are already buying the coin now. So I know that there's some demand for it at a price higher than Bitcoin has to be.
You would have to get mine. So like, all right, there's obviously there's replay protection, right? That's a whole new thing. So you have a split. Say an exchange does the split for you. Say you already have UTXOs on Coinbase, they'll do the split for you. But what if I don't have Bitcoin on Coinbase and I just mine some because it's a little difficulty and I want to send to an exchange? What exchange is going to allow you to send it to, and how many confirmations is it going to take before they consider that like final? Before I can start.
I know, but even if it was 100 confirmations, like, you know, there's only one day of Bitcoin in Bitcoin world. So, and again, this is like a temporary situation. At first, people don't know what the equilibrium difficulty is going to be. The difficulty then rise up, and you have the opposite problem of maybe stuff will go a few days, you know, like I don't know exactly how long it will be, but there'll be a problem where the difficulty may not adjust for more than 2 weeks. So the blocks might be infrequent. And so, yeah, there will be like some problems at first, but they're just related to the difficulty, like reaching equilibrium. They're not like, I really don't see like any reason to just say this is like a complete disaster. This is really not, it's really not a very important part. This is like a simple detail. Like there's plenty of stuff can happen in the first week that has no bearing on whether or not the project survives in the long run.
All right, but say, do you have any plans if, say, it is crazy or God, you know, there's like a 5-10 block reorg or something happened where it's just there's havoc. Are you planning on like changing the hashing algorithm at that point? Like, or are you just going to continue going and whatever happens, happens?
Well, I think we'll learn a lot about how the right way to launch a hard fork, no matter what I do. So people will then, they can look at it and say, maybe this was the right decision, this was the wrong decision. I mean, if we change the hashing algorithm, that almost wouldn't help because there'd still be all this hashing equipment out that we don't know anything about.
Yeah, but I mean, like if you make it a CPU friendly, then, you know, it doesn't matter at that point. Like, you know.
Well, yeah, then you buy yourself some time and you kind of reset the clock until people make FPGAs and they make ASICs for that.
But at that point, the chain is valuable enough for somebody to go and make an FPGA and an ASIC, right? Like you're not going to start making FPGAs if they don't think the chain is going to survive very long. But if there's actual demand and the difficulty keeps going up and it looks like there's more and more hash power that's being thrown at it, then yeah, of course. That's not a bad thing. At least it's organic that way.
Yeah, I agree that you would want it to ramp up like in a commensurate way. But so for example, with Bitcoin Cash, the highest price it had was on like basically on day one, and then its price fell from then on. So actually, if your theory is that the price is going to go up,
the highest price was when Coinbase listed it. That was when it went off through the roof. Like that was when it went to like half of Bitcoin, I believe. But again, there was hundreds of millions of dollars involved in that. Like Bitmain and Roger, that was a coordinated effort to get that pumped, like especially on fork day. And then after Coinbase listed it, then it went crazy. It went to half of Bitcoin. But right after that, it just did whatever the other altcoin does. I mean, same song and dance.
I think a lot of people read into the whole like listed on a exchange thing. People interpret that as like a sign of health and like a sign of like validation, and so then the price, it's like a little rallying point where the price can go up. To me, I'm imagining this project as if nothing existed. So I'm saying, let's imagine there were no exchanges or there were no miners.
Right, Paul. But you're comparing to Bitcoin on Genesis when Satoshi launched it. The problem is that mining Bitcoin at that point didn't cost a lot of money. You know, the difficulty was so low that your CPU was not that much money to burn. Now, if you're starting this at a higher difficulty, and there's no way.
No, but we're starting at the low. We're lowering the difficulty.
Right,
but I mean,
you're not starting it at 1.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
You're still going to be starting. You still need. I mean, it's still going to take power. Those miners still have to pay an electric bill. You have to be able to sell those UTXOs to pay the bill. When Bitcoin first started out, there were no exchanges, but also it didn't cost anything to fucking mine the Bitcoin. Like, there's no power bill to really. Like,
I know, but think about it like this: it's like you kind of have it both ways. If the price is really low and the eCash block is not worth very much, but the difficulty is also low, then it's still profitable to mine. So that particular problem, that's not a problem. But what is a problem is that we're showing up into this world with this big ecology where there is all these ASIC chips and stuff around. As far as I'm concerned, this is just all of this problem is just a question of how to actually reach the equilibrium difficulty, and it's totally a temporary problem that can only last, I would say like 1 to 3 months total. And so it is true that this is like this will be a weird start. It has nothing to do with the fundamentals of the idea whatsoever, and it has everything to do with turning the project on in a world that already has exchanges and ASICs and pools, and kind of like trying to leapfrog it's kind of like, if you introduced tanks, people are fighting each other in rural Australia with like spearmen, and then you just introduce tanks, and it's like a weird adjustment at first. So I'm open to doing some like thing, like one idea I had. I don't want to like just riff off random ideas because it like makes it look undisciplined and weird. But yeah, no, I am aware of this issue, and I think it is. So I think I mentioned already. One of them is like you could have something for like the first 3 months where it's possible to either manually checkpoint a block or manually set the difficulty. And this is horrendous from the point of view of that would be terrible as a long run. To rely on in the long run, it would be horrible. But in terms of figuring out like what should the difficulty actually be in a world where no one knows, it's not the worst idea. A different idea would be to like limit. Bitcoin has these guardrails on how much the difficulty can adjust, and you could have like a temporary period where the guardrails were smaller, and this would be like a soft fork. So instead of being down by a factor of 4 and up by a factor of 4, you could say the difficulty can only go down by like a factor of like, instead of going down 25%, it can only go down like 80%, like it can only go down like a little bit. And it can only go up like 1.2% or something like that. So this would still be within the 4-4 thing. So this wouldn't even be like a hard fork or anything. But this could just like, I'm not sure exactly how it would work when people try to count, because it would be an aberrant difficulty adjustment. But I'm just trying to say it wouldn't be like that. Well, I don't want to get into like it's like a complicated type of thing to get. But so there's a third idea would be to try to have viable futures markets before the fork launches, so that you kind of have some idea of what the price of it is.
That was a V2X thing, and I don't know, man. I always had a problem of telling people to send UTXOs to exchanges to signal, that you want the liquidity, man. There's just not, even during like when Bitfinex did it, there's just no liquidity. Like you can't. It's so hard to like actually determine if there's going to be real demand by a centralized third party offering a futures market, like because.
Yeah, I thought they were very low quality. I agree.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think.
But they ended up being right though. So they ended up saying it would be like 15%. It was sort of like 15% BCH, 85% BTC, and that ended up being like sort of accurate for like when it.
Yeah, for a couple months. For a few months, yeah.
Yeah, it's always going to change month to month. Though that was always the case, right? It's not like any of the prices are stuck there permanently. But it's still pretty good to get it in advance. You're just trying to get it in, because you see what I mean. If you know 1 month in advance what the price will be hypothetically, then you could calculate like what difficulty would be really, really close, and then you would avoid all these problems, I think, because it would turn on and it would be moderately profitable. Some people would switch over, some people would not. So
what about the difficulty adjustment algorithm? Are you doing any tweaks to that, or are you just keeping that vanilla the way it is?
Just talked about some. I would prefer not to at all, and I think maybe embrace the chaos would be more fun and more interesting. But that being said, yeah, if I did anything, it would be like something that where after 3 months it automatically times out, because it has nothing to do with like the system doesn't need it in the long run, but it just needs it to, it's just a question of turning it on for the first time. And you have to like guess at some things, you know what I mean? It's like, you're going to turn it on and you don't know what the price will be and who will mine it.
Right,
And
but
so,
after 3 months, if everything like 2016 blocks is that number will stay the same, right?
yeah.
All right. All right. So that.
Everything on L1 should be exactly the same. And to the extent it's not, it would just be this temporary thing involving
Right. Yeah.
the launch, which is unfortunate. But of course, when you first create it, you have just,
You have to
it's
do
going
things.
from zero.
Yeah,
to,
there's no way. You have to do something. You have to loosen some type of rules in order for that chain to come alive. I'm with you. The other thing, the name, man. You know that there is already a project to eCash. Like, why eCash? Why that?
Well, of course, I considered a lot of different names, but yeah, eCash.com was available, so I got it. And I looked up all the existing eCash projects. I thought they were actually all terrible. So I thought no one's actually muscling in on the name, actually. And so I thought all the contenders for the name are super, super weak. You could get eCash.com. eCash is a great name. It's actually in the white paper, peer-to-peer electronic cash. So I thought that was kind of funny. It's easy to pronounce. It's easy to spell. So it's a great name. I completely disagree with the idea that if a generic name like eCash, like something like email or like e-bike or e-reader or something, like I completely disagree with this. Like a first come, first serve, you call dibs or something. I can't even believe that people are even talking like as if that's a serious point. Someone, you
I don't know. I
get
just think
Mohammed.
Bitcoin hodlers that have UTXOs would probably appreciate if it was a different name. But listen, I mean, it's your project. You can do whatever you want. You like eCash, it's eCash. Just whatever. What else? There's other things.
I mean, you're not referring to Callie's project, are you?
I mean, I particularly don't have a use for eCash. I think
You're
Chaman.
talking about that project is horrendous. Out of all the different eCaches, that is one of the most horrendous of them all.
Which one are you referring? I mean, that's the only one that that's in my zeitgeist.
Well, technically, all the Fediment stuff is also like eCash.
Yeah.
Theoretically.
Yeah, I mean, it's similar to.
Describe themselves as that also. So I think they have described it also as. But yeah, I think the original when you had David Chaum, when you had like these custodial. The problem is the custodial like just leads to everyone lying to themselves about everything else, so it just creates this giant metastasizing cancer of lies that spread everywhere.
The idea is that you get privacy, right? Like you actually get a dollar bill, a digital dollar bill, and you could treat it like a physical dollar bill that you have in your pocket.
But you don't get it though; it's custodial, so you never actually obtain it.
I mean, you don't really get the dollars either. That dollar could be devalued to zero, right? So there's always a trusted third party when it comes to cash.
Well, that's a good point. But I don't think, with the whole point with Bitcoin, so like the assertion with the Chaumian Bitcoin is that you're getting Bitcoin though. So that's not quite the same.
But I mean, the name is not as important. I just want to see this thing take off, man. And just like, I don't know if the way it is right now, like if it has any chance of really taking off, or if, like, other than like, just some kind of like joke thing, like Dogecoin. But I mean, like, I don't know, man. I'm a big fan of UTXO forks. Again, like, I really think that I wish more people would fork Bitcoin's UTXO set instead of, printing their own money. Like, I'm not a fan. The reason I really hated altcoins was because I didn't think people should just print their own fucking money. Like, that's not something that I was ever a fan of.
I have one question for you or anybody, I guess. Like, do you think if it opens, just like, I'm just throwing numbers out there, like at $1,000 at the fork date, does
$1,000?
I'm whatever.
What?
I'm saying, if Bitcoin falls, does it fall $1,000 or does it raise? How does it impact it?
You got to worry about the BTC ratio, the alt BTC ratio, not so much the dollar ratio, because the dollar ratio, I mean, it's part of the Bitcoin ecosystem. But like, you really have to look at that BTC alt ratio in order for this to make sense. So like it all depends on what it falls against Bitcoin. Not really, because there's gonna be no liquidity. Like when you price it in dollars, I mean, it's not gonna tell you much. But when you price it in BTC, it'll tell you a much better story. But again, like I want to see this pump. Like I want this to be successful. That's the whole thing. Also, another thing, one more issue. You're calling this a hard fork, and I believe a hard fork is when you lose a consensus rule and it doesn't cause a split, where you actually have.
No, you're right. But the problem is, you're right, but all the terminology is screwed up. But I actually wrote
Let's fix it, man. You have the perfect opportunity to fix it.
I wrote an essay back in 2016 or something. I think talk about better fork terminology and forks and split. And unfortunately, the language is all messed up. So, I don't know. Like, I don't know how to.
I mean, like, there's going to come a time where Bitcoin's going to need a hard fork because the chain's not going to continue, and anyone that doesn't upgrade won't have access to their UTXOs, right? So that, in my opinion, is a hard fork that doesn't split the chain. What you're doing and what other people do when they fork Bitcoin's UTXO set is you're deliberately causing a chain split. So it's a deliberate chain split. So like I just think
Yeah, well, some people say it's like a spin-off altcoin, which I actually think is a decent attempt at explaining it. But yeah, unfortunately, as I said, that we've had, and this is a talk I gave 2 TabConfs ago about the origin of all these words. Both the soft fork and the hard fork, even though we use the word fork, it describes a fork that does not, like a fork in the road that does not happen. So in every other case, and I had like a picture of a tuning fork like on the slide, and I had like a culinary fork like with food, and it's like the fork is always a fork in the road. It's like when you split, but these soft fork and hard fork refer to ways of resolving the split into one history only. And so they always describe situations where there is no, but this is just the terminology that we ended up with, and it's all messed up. So I don't know how to fix the culture's understanding of which words to use, which I did, but I just think this is a good enough word for now.
Also not that big of a deal. The other question is, I'm not really interested. It doesn't benefit me at all. But why start your own chain, another SHA-256 chain, when you could have just put Drivechain on like Bcash or something?
Well, I didn't really create Drivechain to help an altcoin destroy BTC, so I could, but I think they will anyway. So probably Litecoin will adopt BIP300 on. I think. Like I'm not sure exactly if I understand the question, because it's my view that actually.
Why are you forking Bitcoin's UTXO set to add drive chains? Why not add drive chains to already a chain that exists now?
I know, but it's a strange question. Like you think like I want to play as if the drive chain is like a toy that I want to use and like play with personally. That's not the reason. It's a matter of life or death for the survival of the BTC project. In my opinion.
But right now, I mean, this has nothing to do with BTC project anymore. You're forking Bitcoin's UTXO set. This has nothing to do with it.
That lets everyone escape onto a different, like, so we're on the Titanic and you can escape onto.
So what I'm saying is there's already blockchains that exist.
But I'm saying also that people probably will do that. Like there will be Litecoin.
So what's the point of you forking? Like, what's the point of the fork? If people are already going to add drive chains onto these altcoins, what's the point of this fork?
No, but I'm asking. I don't understand the question at all. Maybe I'm misunderstanding it. I don't know. Why would you even add? Like, because
the reason you're forking Bitcoin's UTXO set is because you want to add drive chains, correct? Like you want drive chains. So you're gonna have this fork with drive chains, right? Like that's the idea.
Well, I guess it's all related. These are different beliefs that are all kind of related to each other. But I guess that's true. So
okay, so now I'm asking you, why fork your own chain? Why not convince the developers on another chain to add?
But why would that help me in any way?
How would this help you in any way?
Well, I guess we're still pretty confused. I don't know. Maybe JK can chime in or something.
I think the idea of just like separating certain people who are not beneficial to the project or like don't hold as axioms that like there is such a thing as minor centralization, that like you're actually creating a new ecosystem and environment in doing so.
But
That
you have
is,
the same miners. It's the same. It's SHA-256. It's the same exact miners.
well, yeah, you need that if you're going to claim to be like the true Bitcoin.
Oh wait, are you trying to be the true Bitcoin? Is that the idea?
I think that's a part of it. I don't think it's the whole project like fails or succeeds depending on it, but
Okay.
Just FYI, K is someone who just came up, and I made a co-host. He has some interesting things to say, but he's not like officially affiliated or whatever. We're just like hanging out here on the space.
I'm
He
just
didn't want to
trying
be.
to get you could like this drive
I
chain
don't
talk.
understand the question in the slightest.
The question is that like you've been talking about drive chains now for a while. I've been saying like I've always wondered like if drive chain is so great, why isn't anyone else really adopting it? Why am I not seeing it out there in the wild? But whatever. That then I muted it. I forgot about it, and now the topic is back. And you're forking your own chain. You're going to fork Bitcoin's UTXO set. You're going to create an altcoin, and you're going to add drive chains to it. So why, like all these
Right.
years, why not make a push for one of these? You were making a push for Bitcoin to add drive chain. You saw that wasn't happening, so you got tired of it, and now you're like, fuck it, I'm just going to create my own chain. But you have already chains that exist. You have even SHA-256 chains that exist. Why not convince those developers to add drive chain?
I know, but you think that I want the drive chain just to like look at it or something?
No, to use. I mean, like, well, dude, you're forking Bitcoin's
To
UTXO
use
set.
to make
What do you think's
to
going to
make
happen?
Bitcoin.
What do you think's going to happen when
How's
you
that?
fork
How's
Bitcoin's
that help?
UTXO set? You think all of a sudden it's going to be thousands and thousands of people coming on and like playing with the chain and using the tech? Like, you're going to look at it. You're going to be looking at it just like you're going to be looking like all these. All you do is look at altcoins. What else? You don't really do anything. You just look at it.
No, I think we have to get to users, and if we don't have a lot of people using the technology, then it will fade away, and it should fade away. And if we have to get. I think we can get to 8 billion users of Bitcoin eventually, and if we don't, some other coin will, and then BTC will go to zero. So I don't. Again, let me try to understand the question more. Like, why would I want? It's very nice. Okay, so first of all, the reason why people are not the reason why I think first of all many people did add drive chain, so but we never put out like an activation client, and so in that sense it was unfinished, even though I think BIP300 is pretty simple because it's just a counter under the hood that counts to 13,000 over and over again. So I don't think it's that complicated, but we never put out any activation client, so it was not possible and there was never any pull request to Bitcoin Core. Like even now we have the BIP300, the QSIP activator for BIP300 301, but like it didn't have like activation parameters or anything for like BIP9 signaling or anything like that. So what bothers me more than people not adopting it is that people not wanting to adopt it. I think that's a bizarre thing. So like imagine that you discovered. Okay, let me give you this analogy. Let me see if this helps you explain anything at all. So let's say you're traveling the world and you show up and you're in like whatever, the Amazon rainforest or something, and you discover that there's a society there that they kill like 90% of their female children. They saw them in half with a giant saw because they're crazy, like Aztec sacrifice people. And they're like, this is like you walk around and then they're like, yeah, ever since we started doing this, our society has started to collapse and our population is in collapse and our civilization is in decline and we're all dying. And what do we do? And then someone proposes BIP 300, which says this is a rule. BIP 300 says stop sawing your own children in half and sacrificing them. And then someone called Mr. Hodl says, or Aztec Hodl, he says something like, well, have you tried getting this law passed like in Mexico City or like in whatever? Have you tried getting it passed in Chile or something? And you're like, what? Like, none of this is the point. Like, the idea is a good idea. It's a harmless idea. We want people to be focused on building great technology and innovation, and we want safe ossification of L1, and we want higher miner revenues. So the fact that people don't want the idea is almost a bigger problem than people not activating it. But there was altcoin Sky Doge that activated the primitive version of BIP300, and then I think Litecoin will, now that the QSIP activator is And there have been many people, as you know, who have been interested in it over the years. We have the layer2labs.com/friends list. You can see a very large number of people were interested in it. Today, all these people we were just talking about people are pivoting to BitVM, but the creator of BitVM, Robin Linus, has always said that BIP300 is better and we should activate it. So it's not like I care intrinsically about BIP300 out of my own ego. Like, I don't really care at all about that. I'm worried about Bitcoin surviving and thriving. That's what I'm worried about. So how on earth would it help for it to activate on Litecoin, a competitor to Bitcoin? I don't know. But we had someone join, RJ,
Yeah, one second.
join.
One second. I have to have this.
Okay.
But you're
Sure.
a direct competitor to Bitcoin now.
Oh, that is a fair.
Well, yeah, now I want, because we forked the set, so I'm gonna save the women and children, which is the UTXO set.
Okay.
And we're going to leave a couple people behind. We're going to leave Peter McCormack and Shinobi behind, maybe, and we're going to escape, and this is the best I can do.
I got
You
it.
know what I mean?
All right. I like
So
it.
I want to save 99% of the important thing is that the project, with all its original owners and the cohort. So basically, that's why I don't care about, why don't you activate it on Bitcoin SV or something, whatever. Okay, that's kind of making my job a little bit worse, I think.
Go ahead, RJ. I'm sorry.
No problems. Good afternoon, everyone. And Mr. Voyager, glad to see you. Paul, I'm thankful that you're doing this because BTC does have a real issue. But I am concerned why you chose to fork Bitcoin. Why did you just not come and participate with Monero? We've talked about this before. And I don't understand why you didn't bring your talents and your purpose is to add privacy to Bitcoin, I'm assuming, right? I mean, that's what we're trying to do with eCash. Correct? Or is this not a privacy play?
This is not a privacy play.
Well, then it doesn't really fucking matter. It's a complete utter waste of time.
There is it's like a very important aspect of it.
I lost the connection for a tiny little bit.
Okay. Paul,
Hey, I think it's a thing. Why didn't I join Monero?
Excuse me. Let me just ask a question because I'm happy Paul's trying to fix Bitcoin. It has a lot of issues.
Oh, Paul's done fixing Bitcoin. Paul's moving on to his own thing. Bitcoin's done.
Well, I agree. Bitcoin is done. Okay, I agree. But I was wondering why Paul did not join the Monero devs.
All right.
Why did you not do that, Paul? You would make such a bigger difference in that world than anything you're doing here. I'm sorry, they just have too much. They have too much money. The biggest problem with Bitcoin, it's almost like a government. It's kind of you're fighting the kings because they'll just kick you off the exchanges if you get too popular. So I don't understand. They're never going to give you liquidity.
Okay, it's a very good question, I suppose.
Yeah,
I don't know if do you think the exchanges, it's kind of like a bit of a conspiracy theory, like they're just running the show and that they don't?
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the case because the exchanges can make a lot of money.
If that wasn't the case, Paul, then the Monero would be listed, correct?
Monero was not listed because Monero does not produce much transaction fees. Man.
That's a bold-faced lie. It produces more transactions than Dogecoin.
No. With the exchanges.
Well,
that's the exchanges want to make money. They don't care about what it does on chain.
Plus, I think. Okay, wait.
Okay. Well, that's fair.
Everyone just be cool here for a second.
That's a fair opinion.
I think the exchanges are making a huge amount of money, right? And they have to interface with the fiat world. So my guess is that they probably, I don't know, I have no idea, but my guess is that they probably look at Monero and they think, oh, this is the privacy drug coin, and they just think, well, they just kind of shrug because they think. So I think.
But they celebrate the public drug coin, Bitcoin. Like Bitcoin is the public drug coin. Bitcoin. Why are we
the darknet usage of Bitcoin?
What I'm saying is Bitcoin's reputation. The cypherpunks beat their chest about Silk Road and facilitating drug purchases throughout time. The point I'm saying, Paul, if you're no threat to Bitcoin, they'll list you. The moment you become a threat to Bitcoin, they'll kick you off.
Just to go back to one of the thing about privacy is there is a huge privacy component in adding a Zcash sidechain. Like that is like a major.
Zcash is shielded. It's not a default
Well,
it's not default privacy or anonymity. It's a shielded transaction.
there's other
It's not the
things
same thing.
we were talking about too. Like one's called deniability for adding,
You can laugh,
privacy.
Vlad. I like Vlad down there, even though we might disagree with Zcash. If you'd like to have the Israeli coin, go right ahead.
Problem with Zcash was the trusted setting. That's my problem with Zcash.
But I have no problem
Okay.
with. But why do they give it to
Question?
us? You know.
All right. So the question though is why don't
Yep.
I work on Monero? And
Correct.
although I have a lot of respect for Monero, I was a doubter of Monero at first. And when I say at first, I mean like 2014. They went on Chris and Josh's podcast in, I think 2015, maybe it was early 2016. And then they were like, he was like, oh, fluffy pony Ricardo. He was like, oh, what should I do instead? And they had no answer because there was no answer because, of course, what can you do instead is if you care about privacy, if you want to innovate and you want to do something new, you don't have an alternative because we never implemented sidechains on BTC. So I think actually with Monero, it's the same. It doesn't fix the underlying problem, which is that the developers will disagree over what constitutes an innovation, and it'll be very hard to resolve that in the future. So I think BIP 300 is better than any
you want to centralized. You want it to be centralized where one person has the kind of like the map of the future of it. Is that fair?
No, it's decentralized where no single person. Right now you have Bitcoin Core, and then you have Monero also. At the end of the day, someone releases the full node software that everyone uses. So there's only one. It's in the nature of the blockchain that there can only be one full node per blockchain. But that's what BIP 300 fixes. So that it re-decentralizes that. So I think that that's a more important problem to solve, actually. I think Monero and Bitcoin Cash and all these things, Ethereum, they were just symptoms of the fact that people didn't agree over what constitutes an innovation. And they think, is this actually a better idea for some people or not? So I think Monero is a very valuable project. And Monero has done a lot of work to beat the other thing is the network effects are really strong. So you want to be a part of a project that's going to be the number one project. And that's where this has an edge, actually. Even though it's small now, it has the ability to continue growing without these disputes holding it back. So because there's a flywheel, there's a ratchet where whenever someone invents something useful, it can escape onto the L2 without anyone holding it back. And then it can get its own users. And then all the L2s, they compete in a healthy way where they try to produce better software and snipe each other for users, But then they also collaborate in another way because they have something that unites them all, which is they all share the same 21 million coin units. And so that is a better configuration in the long run. So again, it's small now, but everything else hits a ceiling because it's so, but it's a good question. And the Monero community is there's sort of one of the few people with real users who actually use the software for its actual design purpose.
John McAfee said it perfectly. Trading crypto to get rich is not that's not the goal. The number go up theory is complete utter bullshit. It's not what crypto was meant to be. This was not meant to be I buy Bitcoin. And the funny thing is that what matters in business is absorption rate, not maximum supply. So if you have 21 million houses, but there's always 5 million houses for sale, just because there's a maximum amount of houses doesn't mean that value is guaranteed to go up. It just means that there's always 5 million houses being sold. And if all you do is tie the value to your crypto to the United States dollar, you're always going to have people selling. So I don't understand how this bubble, the only narrative that Bitcoiners have is there's a maximum supply and all these people are buying it, hoarding it. That doesn't mean that you get a bid ask price to go up. That's not how order books work.
Well, I think there's a more fundamental problem, which is it's kind of like we're climbing a ladder. Imagine two ladders, and one of them is almost long enough to reach the top where we're trying to get to. This is like this very old game that they used to make for kids for the computer.
Ladder
like
shoots and ladders. Those are old games.
Treasure Mountain.
Oh, treasure.
But yeah, but because in one of them there's a ladder that doesn't quite reach, and you have to go back down, and you have to go all the way around. It happens sometimes in video games. Like the ladder is almost to the top. So this is the Ponzi scheme ladder. And then there's another ladder that actually does reach the top. So it pays off at the very end. And so you can look at the ladder as like the number go up, like the price going up, like you're getting closer and closer to your goal. But the final rung of the ladder is that is actually getting the real users. So you can get, even if you're not acquiring real users now, if you are acquiring the real users in the future, that is enough that is enough to make the number go up today, because you can say, well, we anticipate that we will get these users, and so the number can go up and up and up and up, and then you finally cross the last rung and you make it up to the.
Sounds like this sounds like a VC presentation, but
well, it is. This is how finance works. Where finance says basically.
Yeah, I don't think
finance says that we will be able to add a lot of value in the future. So, because this is the part of the beauty of finance is that if you didn't have the finance world, and let's say someone had an idea, let's say someone is out there mowing lawns. This is the neighborhood lawn mowing kid. He's mowing his lawns, and he has an idea for better lawn mowing configuration or whatever. If there's in a world where there's no finance, he has to personally save up enough money to like upgrade his lawnmower or do whatever it is that he thinks is the most efficient. He has to personally save it up. And even if one of the people that whose house he cuts the grass for, that might be an elderly retired man with a lot of cash under the mattress. He's got a ton of money saved up. So it's a situation where a young entrepreneur has an idea, but they don't have time, and they don't have money, and they take them a while to save it up. And you have an old man who has money, but he's not getting a return on it. It's just sitting there doing nothing. And finance lets you manipulate space and time and say, well, listen, I'll be making a lot of money, in 2 years, but now I need the money to buy a new lawnmower or whatever, blah, blah, blah. So finance is very useful, and it's part of civilization. So the haters of finance are wrong.
Well, I agree with that, but how does that apply to what you're building?
Well, I was talking about the ladder and the rung. So I was saying the final rung is we have lots of users who are happy with Bitcoin. Yeah. And so that you can get number go up. You can get number go up, even as long as you don't have those users, but you just need to be able to get them eventually. But if you never get them, then you are in a Ponzi situation.
The new users are the X liquidity for the old users. That's what.
Right. I'm saying that whether or not that's true, that all hinges on whether or not we end up getting real users. So that's why I'm focused. I try to stay focused on the real users, the actually important part.
Yeah. That's okay. I see what you're saying. So what you're saying is you want to make Bitcoin usable, so new users.
We need real users. Real users, the people who pay transaction fee on the network. To me, that's more like sales revenue.
Correct.
And the number go up is kind of like the stock price. Okay. All right, we got Sergio. We got the great Sergio.
Thank you for having me on. Have a nice day.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, thank you.
Hi, Paul.
Hello.
Hi, everyone. I have a lot of questions and a lot of things that could be improved. I don't know why you chose those decisions, and I'm gonna go one by one. Maybe you have good answers to them. The first one is you claim that this fork is an airdrop, but it's not. It's something I would call a fork drop, because basically you are not fixing a snapshot of the UTXOs. You're just those UTXOs are changing all the time. So basically, it's not like you take a snapshot and then you give the money to those owners. You don't implement full replay protection on both sides, like changing the signature scheme or a single bit in somewhere so that there is no possibility of transaction reply. And that makes it very, very hard for users and for sidechains, for anyone to claim your tokens without putting their own private keys in danger. So it's like if we take like your what you were saying, like this town where there's women and children, you want to save the women and children, but you are telling them, okay, you have to jump in 3 seconds, 2, 1, 0, and if they don't jump in time and they keep transacting, they actually lose their own all their eCash tokens because they didn't act too fast. So I don't know why you chose to do this kind of fork drop.
Okay, but then that's two. So I think you said you had a few things. So I guess we'll just do those two first. So first of all, the terminology as to like the fork drop versus airdrop versus hard fork or whatever. I have no idea. Like what we'll just do it, and then people can decide what they want to call it. They can name it whatever they like, and I'm not going to try to stop anyone. But what it is because it also has, unlike as you say, unlike a snapshot thing, we actually have the whole blockchain history also. So it's not even like we just import the UTXO set. So in that way, I'm not sure it is kind of like a hard fork. But then Mr. Hodl was saying, well, it's not really a hard fork because the old BTC is still going to exist. So I don't know. Maybe I think we just need new words for all these things because the words that we have don't seem to be helping anyone. But even though the word situation is screwed up, people seem to understand what's happening anyway. So we should write to the dictionary and ask for some better words. But yeah, I don't know exactly what the perfect word would be, but it is a intentional split off of BTC where everyone gets more coin. All BTC owners get more coins. So the replay protection, it is kind of it's interesting. Everyone has a lot of different views on this, and a lot of people seem to want similar things. The metaphor is very interesting, where it's kind of like you're saying, I was thinking of it more the opposite way, where if they do nothing, then they can wait and the coins will be, if they just don't move either coins,
But
then
people do
if they do move
transact. They
both
do
coins
move
will
coins.
be, it's like a Dropbox. It's like a Dropbox that's synchronized. Yeah, if you spend the BTC, then you will lose the eCash. Right. Also, but here's the point: is you didn't want to leave. You didn't jump on, so you missed the boat. It gives people an incentive to get on the boat as quickly as possible.
Yeah, but that's not always
It's
possible.
leaving the station.
I'll give you an example of Rootstock or Liquid or C3 or any sidechain. Like basically you have tens of thousands of active users. So either in Rootstock, the private keys are not even available. No one has the access to private keys. Private keys of the bridge are actually in HSMs. These HSMs do not handle or backup or do anything with the private keys. So essentially, if we would like to help the community to split their eCash coins and give them back to the community, I don't know how, but let's see, we would need to prepare a hard fork with all the community support in a very short time, just to be able to recover those coins in some way, trying to use the existing HSMs to split them, will be very problematic. And even in that case, we wouldn't know like who to give the coins to, because there are some smart contracts that they are the owners of the coins. That these are not owned by people; these are owned by smart contracts. So it's kind of very complicated situation. And if we don't, as a community, if we don't split the coins, then what can happen is like, people can have a run to the breach, trying to get out of the breach of the sidechain before this event, just to claim the coins, and that would be terrible because the breach has a limited amount of UTXOs that can be recycled during the peg out process. So we can have a run to the peg and a depeg. So it's kind of very, very problematic for any of these sidechains. So I'm pretty sure that your women and children live on the side chains, because that's where the bitcoins are being traded and used for everyday use, not the bitcoiners that are holding them in cold storage. So you are actually hurting the people that use Bitcoin most as a means of payments, and I really think that's a bad idea.
Well, a lot of that makes some sense to me, but not all of it. So first of all, as you know, BIP300 works the same way. Only so many people can come out of the bridge at a time. I think it's going to be very hard to do like a hard fork unless you adopt the principle that says, listen, we're hard forking the network. This is the blockchain, and the blockchain knows who owns which coins on L1. And now here I have I have a question for you about like, okay, so in the case of, you say that there will be no, like, could you copy and paste the entire rootstock? Like, because what you're saying is there's the situation where there's HSMs that you don't actually know the private key, but in the L1 Bitcoin blockchain, there's the coins have been sent into some script. And isn't it the case that in the eCash world, you can just restart the rootstock, you can copy and paste the whole rootstock universe over there.
Mm-hmm.
There'll be two entire universes of rootstock, and one, because shouldn't it be the exact same sequence of messages in both cases?
Still, we have to hard fork in some way because Rootstock or Bitcoin Oracle, it follows Bitcoin as an SPV client that is embedded in a smart contract. So it just follows the highest hash rate. So if we want, to create a split of Rootstock that follows another chain that has initially lower or has a hard fork, then we have to hard fork Rootstock anyway. So yeah, it could be possible to split Rootstock in two. It would be very problematic because obviously, who is going to merge mine the new eCash Rootstock? I don't know. We will have to run to find miners that want to merge mine this other chain. Yeah, potentially could be possible, but I think it would be horribly difficult to pull out.
Yeah, it might be. Wouldn't it be theoretically the case that you could come back later and you could say, if you had roots, you could come back months later. I'm just saying, we're just talking theoretically here. I don't know. This could be feasible. But you could say, months later, you could say, hey, if you had BTC in a rootstock sidechain in August 2026, there's a bunch of eCash waiting in the parallel world of the rootstock, and then we're going to slowly withdraw it all and give it to you.
It's not possible, but because we will be, if we do nothing, we'll be, as a community, we'll be under an attack. Like, anyone can peg in Bitcoins that have already been split, and then peg out Bitcoins that are not yet split and cash out. And I've done some math to see how much money will be there to grab. And
I don't know, but wouldn't that be... Okay, sorry, finish your thought.
So depending on the value of this new token, it can be a couple of $1 million. Even if the token is initially low value, it's going to be a lot of money. So I'm pretty sure that someone is going to recycle Bitcoins and peg in, split Bitcoins and peg out Bitcoins that have not been split and take all the money. So 2 months later, there will be no eCash tokens to split.
So what you're saying is, I think so. I'm just making sure that I understand it. So you're saying that they will spin up the parallel eCash rootstock, because don't they have to do that to get this?
No.
And then they want the eCash out of the rootstock UTXO pool.
Yeah, they don't have to split rootstock. They peg in Bitcoins that have already been split, like this Bitcoin this have no eCash tokens associated with them, and then they will peg out UTXO that have not moved.
So the rootstock will sign it, right? Okay, yeah, I get it. I think
so. You basically consume all the eCash tokens that are associated with these tokens, and this could be prevented if you take a snapshot. So if you take a snapshot at a certain point in time, then yes, we can do a lot of things with time, trying to find the owners of each one of these Bitcoins or eCash tokens and distribute them. But we are not, this way you do it, we are really pressed on what to do before the split date.
Yeah, I hear, because the ideal thing I was thinking of is that this does give people more of an incentive to look into it earlier. So I guess it's just it works a little too well, maybe, in this particular bizarre, but I think you want it to be like, if you add, the problem with adding replay protection is it's sort of saying we have a situation where someone's indifferent and they haven't looked into the, well, hey, here's a weird question. Why don't you just do the drain attack yourself, and then you would get all the eCash? Like, you could probably do it. I don't know if you were in a technically in a position to do it very quickly before, you know.
Yeah,
why not?
It would require, like, Bitcoins take in the POPEC, which is the current breach, takes 36 hours to so 10 hours to get in and 36 hours to get out. So you will need a lot of liquidity, a lot of collateral to just keep that flowing. I would say you need 100 or several hundred Bitcoins to make sure that, you know, yeah, I mean, it could be done, but it's, again, who and whose responsibility to do that? I wouldn't do it myself, because I don't think, you know, from the legal point of view, whose eCash are these? That's another important question, right? Whose coins
Yeah,
are
I
these?
agree, and certainly it's an unintentional. You know, I certainly had no intention of making it so, like, when people have these shared UTXO schemes, like, okay, the ideal thing in a way would be if there was some kind of like, if it's kind of hard to explain. I don't know if the audience will get it at all, but like, if there was some kind of like super replay where it would be aware of the rootstock thing, so that when the person put a split coin in, it would know that it can only get.
That
It
would be
can't.
awesome. That if you
Yeah,
can implement, I mean, we can every
that would
single
be kind of hard. But one reason why it would be hard is because you have to go down the line and figure out each time someone's like sharing a UTXO. Well, this is like what the very first
no,
comment I
it's
make was about, like, you have to say, like, well, the network says these are the owners of the UTXOs, and then the other stuff that people are saying, like on Lightning or on, is kind of like their own business because they've taken it off of the L1 network. And so that's the kind of the contradiction of it. But that would
but
be like the
you can
super solution.
you came with a good idea. Let's say we put, you know, an up return, let's say up return and some specific magic word there. And when you see these transactions, these are no longer valid on your eCash. That's enough. It could be anything. It could be an unlock value. It could be just
Oh no, we
anything.
actually have that already, Sergio. So I don't know if because the way we have it set up is that you can disable the replay
Oh,
if you run our software. So it goes back the other way. So we have this thing where there's like an extra byte in the TXID that's valid on the eCash world, but not in the BTC world, because it results in a completely
well,
different
but
TXID.
we need the opposite. We need something that existing Bitcoin transactions can have that prevents them from being replayed on eCash. That would be enough for
Well,
us
that's the kind
to.
of thing I didn't really want. But I think, hey, since you can run rootstock, though, maybe you could make it so that anything that's pegged into rootstock.
Okay.
I don't know exactly. You know what I mean? Like, you could make it so that there's probably something we could probably. I'll have to think about it some more.
Okay.
So, all someone told me was that you wrote an article about not liking so I was like, I didn't
Well, I
read
think
it. So I got
it
to read
brings
it.
a lot. It brings a lot of trouble to our sidechain. That's the main reason, and I have some other reasons, like grabbing Satoshi coins, but that's minor. I would say that the main problems for me is the way you implemented replay protection and how that affects the sidechains. That's the main issue for me.
Philosophically, the replay protection is sort of trying to say, like, the people who are indifferent and they're not looking into either coin, they haven't, like, they're not trying to move only one coin. So it's kind of like syncing. It's kind of like keeping the network synchronized and saying this is actually activity on both networks. And I'm saying, as soon as if someone cares, if you care enough to split the coins, you can. And if you don't want to split them, then then you don't want them split. So that's kind of the
Okay.
thinking back.
But there is another way to implement the same logic, will be to have a snapshot and allow the claiming time to be 6 months, let's say, any number of months, like 2, 3, 4 months, but yet you still have a snapshot. So that would allow us to have, a certain amount of time to do something. At the same time, it would give you, this idea that if you do nothing for 3 months, then you've lost your access to your eCash coin. Are you there, or I lost connection?
And it didn't happen. But yeah, I don't know. For some reason, the spaces crash for me sometimes. So yeah, okay, that's an interesting idea, but yeah, I'm not leaning towards changing it, but I think there's some way between the splitting tool and between the, I think there will be some way. I do wonder about the philosophy of it all, because it's like you're saying but yeah, it is interesting that like you could just say import this UTXO set, and how would that really be different? And then you wouldn't have to import 900,000 blocks and all this other stuff.
I mean, to me, it just seems like it's kind of like working at dealing with the alternative approach that other people have used, which is like federated sidechains, and it kind of just points out some of the flaws in that methodology.
Yeah, I'm inclined to say let's embrace the chaos and just like not your keys, not your coins. It's a very ironic, but yeah, I still like I'll sort of think about it. But we had a bunch of people who requested, and now it's already 3:54. Time really flies. So we'll try to get to some more questions, unless Sergio wants to say. We can,
No,
as always next week.
Just want to thank you, Paul, for having the opportunity to say these problems that it could bring to our community. I hope you could address them. Thanks.
Okay, thanks very much.
Yeah,
thanks for coming up. All right, we got a crypto Voyager again. Hello.
Yeah, hi Paul. Hi Paul. I was thinking a little bit more about those side chains. The only thing connecting the side chains with each other is just the money. Is that correct?
Well, in my conception, they're all merge mined, and they have a deposits and withdrawals. So these are the connections. So from L1 you deposit coins into them. So otherwise the coins don't exist in the L2, and then you can withdraw. And then they're merge mined also. Merge mining's been around for a long time.
Yeah. No. I have another question. A few abstract layers further up. Let's say I have on one side chain I have data. I don't know, some prediction market or whatever. And on another side chain I have I communicate with proof of existence, some documents, and then on some other layer I have something like BitVM, some calculations. They don't see each other, do they?
No, they don't. But you could build an application that would see all of them. It would that application would need to run a full node of all three. So there'd be like a blow up in the cost of full node. But again, we're living in a world where the computers and everything and the software, everything's improving.
Yeah, but that's the defense that the BSV people said. The BSV
I agree.
People said that hardware costs are non-issue. I'm just.
Well, I'm not saying it's a non-issue. I was just asking. You asked a question about the point of sidechains is that they basically allow you to like opt in like a la carte. Like BSV says you basically have to eat all the food in the buffet. Like in that movie Seven, when they forced the guy to eat until he died. You have to have it all. But and then so like maybe Bitcoin Core alone, that's just like you only get to eat the soup and the crackers, and you don't get to eat anything else.
Is that so though? So.
Well, it's a metaphor. So like Bit 300 is like
okay. So here's my take. If I want to do something like an if then that, yeah, there's this web page that says if then that, if this happens then do that, then I need to have a communication to the different side chains. And the BSV people say, yeah, well, okay, we're gonna stuff you full, like what you call it, French goose liver, foie gras. Okay.
For that,
You
just
say
run a
no,
light
that's
client,
stupid.
though.
You say that's, well, it's not just you that say that's stupid. It's all what the small blockers say that's stupid. Okay, fine, whatever. Okay. Now you say no, we're gonna do it a la carte. But in a la carte, I would have to also again do the foie gras. I would also have to have the hardware for all of those.
You wouldn't
Instead of specializing in my single application and by game theory, be confident that the transactions providers do have a full copy. Honestly, I don't even care about the full copy. I just want with what's it called, with the leaves, with the Merkle trees, and the Merkle trees, just the transactions that are interesting to me. Those are the ones that I want to copy.
Yeah.
And I can then, if they're all on one side chain or they're all on one chain, I don't care how you call it, but if they're all in one blob, then they can communicate with each other. I can't do that with different side chains.
You could do that. You could just run a light client that is able to communicate with all of them, and it wouldn't require you to sync for all of those for the application you described about, like, if.
Oh, okay. So there is a light client for sidechains.
Yeah. You can build a light client in any way that cares about only specific ones if you want. Like, it's
but
really...
I thought, okay. So how can I trust that the other guy that has the full node won't stiff me?
Well, in the same way that if you run a light client for like SPV proofs on BTC, that you have sufficient nodes that you can pick one at random, or just not even at random, you can pick one you trust. Like if you use Blockspace, block.space.
Doesn't that then refute the idea that you cannot trust miners, and that's the reason why blocks have to be small?
Well, yeah, I don't think that you need to not trust miners. That's part of a thing, I suppose. Then
we could have big blocks by from the beginning.
Yeah,
the whole idea of sidechains is that we cannot trust miners, and we have to have a full node of the BTC layer 1. And since that blows up, we need sidechains. Is that
I don't think it's 100% right, because the miners and the full nodes do different things. And the way I see it, the sidechain idea says that you can a la carte increase. We have the base package, which is the L1, 1 megabyte Bitcoin Core, 4 megabyte, whatever you want to call it. You have Bitcoin Core small block. That's like the base package. Everyone has to buy that in order to get in the door. It's like the cover charge in the club. You got to pay that to get in. But then you can order whatever in the sidechains world. You can order whatever drinks you want. You can get bottle service, whatever. You get VIP, etc. So it's like you can increase. Now, what do you get when you run a full node? Well, that's the only way of knowing for sure that when you're looking at the actual blockchain, and that's the only way for it's the way of measuring confirmations that it's the most reliable. If you rely only on SPV, you need someone else to be running a full node. An SPV node without that's not paired with a full node cannot do anything. So you are a free rider to some extent. Now SPV is a brilliant idea. I love SPV, but it's just like we can't have everyone use SPV. That's like saying
by that idea, then JK's light client is also a dot, because I don't trust anybody enough to not to use a light client.
Maybe you don't.
So which one is it now?
Well, I don't understand what you're saying with the reason, again, why SPV is not good, for lack of a better word, because I love SPV. It's a great idea. It's a phenomenal idea. But we can't build a world where everyone's focused on SPV. That's like building a world where everyone's on welfare and no one's paying any taxes.
We pay transaction fees.
That's not enough. Someone has to pay the validation cost.
Yeah, that's in the transaction.
These are separate things. No, they're unrelated.
I didn't know, because every time I make a transaction, I just pay transaction fees. I didn't know I paid validation fees.
No, I'm saying someone has to pay. When you run a full node, you pay the validation. The difference transaction fee in the full node is, of course, You pay the transaction fee
Okay,
once.
Paul. Wait a minute. Okay, so first of all, I need a clarification. A full node doesn't mine, is that correct?
Yes, right.
Okay,
Not
so
necessarily.
a full node does not mine. Okay, it just validates.
That's right.
Okay, now if I run a full node, I run it because I'm paranoid. If I don't run a full node, I trust somebody else to run a full node. Where exactly do I pay that somebody else to run that validation node?
No, that's when you're using SPV and you're free riding.
No, there are 10,000, 20,000 full nodes that are validating and I'm not paying them.
I know, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying you're not paying them.
Yeah, I'm not paying them. There are
Right, we agree.
millions of people using Bitcoin and only 10, 20,000 full nodes. So as you're saying, we
I
have
agree.
99% free riders.
Right.
Aha, and it's still working and everybody's fine and dandy. So where's the problem?
We can't, it's all, I completely 100% agree with you in every way. SPV is great. Free riding is great if you can get away with it. But don't you understand, it's like this. When you're on an airplane, you want the stewardesses to be very confident and very happy.
Yes, I pay that with my ticket.
The pilot and the co-pilot, they should be paranoid because someone has to land the plane. You know what I mean? So we have to have
I'm paying that with my airfare.
So
all those costs are inside.
But don't you understand that if you go into the engineering department, you don't want them just thinking, oh, everything's going to be fine. We'll just free ride off of someone else. Someone has to, we all can't cheat off of, it's like everyone in the class is cheating off of one.
Paul, when I make a normal transaction on BTC, where exactly is the field for me to pay for the validation?
No, you and I agree that there is no field.
There is no field for validation. The validators do it altruistically or because they're paranoid.
We could flip it around and say, what if there were no full nodes and there was no copy of the blockchain anywhere?
Well, it would be the same way that it was in 2009 when the concept of a full validating node did not exist.
No, I'm asking you right now. Let's say that there were no full nodes.
Yes.
At all, for mining and non-mining, and there's no copy of the blockchain exists. Well, then what's going to happen next? No one will ever get
a copy of the blockchain does exist. The miners have it.
No, I was saying
have it so that they can mine a new block.
Well, I don't think that's true. Are you like a Bitcoin SV supporter?
I don't shoot the messenger. The messenger doesn't matter.
I'm just no. It actually does matter because I'm just trying to figure out like what.
No, Paul, because I'm asking you questions. That doesn't matter who the messenger is. If you want to go ad hominem, you can go ad hominem. But that doesn't actually really resolve the question.
It's because the people in a certain group, they all reliably believe different errors. So sometimes I catch it from Mr. Hodl, and he has a completely different like life philosophy than Adam Back or than Luke Dash Jr.
Look. I have sorry to interrupt you. I have a purple hat. Okay. Which basically tells you that you can put on whatever identity you want on me. Okay? Let's not go ad hominem. Let's not say, this guy is from this camp. Okay? I already told you in the beginning a few weeks ago that I really hope that this project works. Okay? Because BTC needs shaking up.
So in the Bitcoin, some people in the Bitcoin SV community, maybe not all, but it's actually a myth that the miners need a full node, and in fact, most miners do not actually run a full node, so they don't need one, and they mostly don't have one. So the Bitcoin SV idea that the miners will always have a copy of the blockchain that's not true today. I mean, it could conceivably be true in a world where everyone expects.
The Merkle trees and the Merkle hash that it was once part of the blockchain.
Well, I'm asking you about a world where no one.
If I have data, again, I have a question. To you. If I have data with the Merkle tree and the Merkle path and the Merkle leaves and all that other stuff, and the 100 years down the road, we come together and I show you, hey, look, this thing was part of the blockchain, and you look at the current tip, will you be able to prove that it was part of the blockchain, yes or no?
We're still talking past each other because forget 100 years. We're not going to make it 10 minutes to the next block unless someone knows whether or not each transaction is a double spend or something that spends a UTXO that doesn't exist. Because the only way to do that is with the full node, is when you have the real copy of the blockchain, that you actually have checked everything and you have everything organized into little tidy databases. So we will never make it. So the full node is a required minimum cost required to view the blockchain and whatever. And so someone has to pay that. At least one person has to pay that cost. And I think I personally, this is just a matter of personal opinion, I think it's inappropriate for the technical people. This is where I agree with the small blockers, and I even agree with, to some extent, Greg Maxwell and Luke Dash Jr., that the mechanic working on the plane, he should not be saying like, oh yeah, this plane's never crashed, it's going to be fine. And he should be paranoid, and he should check and double check everything. But the stewardesses should really not be paranoid. They shouldn't be going on the plane thinking, God, is this the time the plane is going to crash into a mountainside and kill everyone? So I think when you have when you're designing the whole system, you cannot. The free riding is you have to zoom out and look at all the different stakeholders.
In that analogy, where is the usual 9 to 5 normie? Is he just a passenger?
I guess they would be a passenger. I didn't really think about.
Do they have to have the full knowledge of how the plane works?
I don't think that's
I don't
the point
think so.
of the analogy. But what was
is he then a free rider? Does he not have then the full node?
Yeah, the people who don't run the full node and they only use SPV, they are the free riders. I wrote an article about that. We're going to try to get, because it's already 4:09. I'm going to have to go soon. But I'm going to try to get to someone else. But please come back next week. And also, I wrote an article called BSV and the Data Availability Problem. You can read it on truthcoin.info. I wrote the whole article about this topic.
Okay.
And I did an interview with, what's his name? The guy, Kurt, he's very nice. I did an interview with him about this exact thing. If people want to learn more about that, then I'm sure you can find it on YouTube. And I thought Kurt was a super cool guy, and we had a lot of stuff that we agreed about, and we made fun of Luke Dash Jr. and his weird idea. But let's try to get to decentralized D. Ordex.com.
Yeah, I have nothing valuable to say. I just wanted to come up here and let everyone know, if you're also extremely fucking confused by what this BSVer just kept talking about for 20 minutes. By the way, he is a BSVer. You can tell by the PFP, Paul. You really need to step your game up and get your noticing game up. But yeah, I put a meme up top for you guys. If you're thoroughly confused about what the fuck they just talked about for 30 minutes, just ignore it. It was absolutely pointless. Just check the meme. You'll see what's going on here. Paul, I applaud you for having to deal with people all the time. I just want to point out to everyone, Paul is forking, so he doesn't have to argue with you fucking retards anymore. So he can just prove it works, and then you guys could come in hindsight 2020 bullshit for the next 10 years. That's the point, okay? So all this discussion about this and that, small, tiny detail, is just a fucking massive distraction. The point is staying similar to Bitcoin, guys, because it's supposed to prove this works on Bitcoin. If it goes on Monero and it goes on Litecoin, why didn't you build on Bitcoin Cash? These are all brain dead takes.
We got Have a good Justin getting one in. Thank you for that.
All right, that was fun. Thanks a lot. Well, that's pretty fun. Okay, well, maybe, I don't know, it's 4:11, so I guess we got Justin with a hand up, though, so maybe we can sneak a Justin in at the last final question of the day.
Yeah, hey, thanks, Paul. So what exactly is the fee that you are speaking of? Not the transaction fee.
This is the validation idea that you're talking about.
So the fee is validating the transaction?
I second that.
I'm just asking about this. I'm just asking, I think that's what you were referring to. So, okay, so there is a transaction fee in Bitcoin because you're bidding, there's a supply and demand for block space. But separate from that, there are all kinds of other important prices in Bitcoin, like the exchange rate, which is a completely different price. But also the full node cost. This is its own thing. And it's very important. And I wrote about it in that article that I mentioned. It's called BSV and the Data Availability Problem. And if you open any piece of blockchain software, including the Bitcoin SV full node, and I opened it and I took a screenshot of it, and this is how it works, this is how it has to work. If the node, I'm talking about the full node software, it will request the blockchain from people, and if it gets a full block, it will scan every transaction in the block to check to see that every single transaction is following the rules and that none of them are double spends and none of them spend coins that don't exist or invent coins out of thin air, etc. cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the full node does all this stuff. And if it requests a block or if it requests a transaction, this is the data availability problem. If it requests a block, it says, okay, someone give me block 700,014, and no one gives them the block, the full node will just assume that the block is invalid. It's not going to like stay on the fence about it. It says, no, we have to have, I'm only going to build on this block if it's valid, and I'm only going to connect the next block in the sequence to this block if it's, you can't have an invalid parent for a child block. So the full node software needs all the data to be available, and that means that for everything in the blockchain, the full node must first must download this data, it must validate it, and it must store it, and then it must actually serve it back. And if it's unable to do this, like if the network can't do this, then the network just stops existing. And so this cost, which is very low because software has gotten cheaper and bandwidth has gotten cheaper, but it's a pretty low cost. But this is an important cost to watch. This is like if you're running a steam engine, you're running a locomotive or something. You have all these little gauges, You'd be like, oh, you got to watch this number. And the people who want unlimited L1 block size, they just say this number can just go as high as you want and everything will be fine because miners will take care of it. And I explained in the essay why that's not true and why it is, in fact, it's like you're relying, this is the Novocaine, the SPV and this whole miners thing. This is like a Novocaine that it blinds you to the real problems you experience and, from doing the work, which is not that hard. Okay, yeah, so Justin has the hand up again. So does that make sense?
Yeah, sorry about the background noise. Now I understand the problem here, and I will read your article. And there is a very real example of this data availability problem because the creator of Dogecoin, Billy M2K, before he created Dogecoin, he created a currency that was based on, it has the name of the currency from Animal Crossing. I don't recall the name right now, but it was completely forgotten about. No one has a copy of that original chain to this day. And so in 2024, people started mining it again. Now, if you had like the original chain, there would be a history there, but unfortunately, no one has a copy of the original chain back in 2014.
Okay, my thing cut out again, but I think there's actually, for Ripple and Stellar, I think some of the blocks went permanently missing, and they just kind of just declared, we don't care, and that was something that people made fun of them for. But I think you were talking about the guy who made Dogecoin, he made something else, and then they lost some blocks or something. Is that what you're saying? Could you repeat it a little bit?
Yeah, sorry about the noise. I'm in a quieter place. Yeah, so he created something for Doge. I forget the name of it, but everyone forgot about it. No one minded. It was the name of the currency from the video game Animal Crossing. And so no one has so back in 2024, people rediscovered it and they started mining it again. But from 2014, the Genesis block to 2024, no one has a copy of it. That was my point.
Yeah, I mean, that could be fine as long as there are like no important, like if there were 0 transactions during that time, then there's nothing theoretically wrong with that per se. But yeah, everyone wants something for nothing. And so we all wish, like I have like a metaphor, I don't know if it works, but in the essay I have an early metaphor about like, okay, it's every child out there, what are they just want to cry or whatever until they get some ice cream. Of course, children are great, we love the children, but the child, they just want stuff all the time and they never work. They want to live in a house, but they don't build a house, and they want ice cream, but it's not like they manufacture it. They don't have a job, they don't pay for the ice cream, So it's like everyone wants something for nothing, which is fine. And it's even fine to build it allowing for an efficient quantity of free riders. So some free riders is just fine. And I disagree with Luke that absolutely if you have the network and then you have 5 people join who aren't running a full node, it's as if the whole network has exploded and burst into flames and is dead. I don't have a problem with that. I mean, I disagree with Luke, and I think that that's not right. So you can have some free riders, but it is not a good idea for someone considering the whole system as a whole to just say, well, we can add lots and lots of free riders who are free riding on something that's becoming more and more and more expensive over time, forever. It's just going to the cost will just go up and up and up and up. With no limit, and it's like in Futurama. Thus, they drop a giant ice cube into the ocean, thus solving the problem once and for all. But they need a bigger ice cube every year. So, that's not the right way to, think about any of these things. And it's inappropriate because when you say free riding is the official policy, or you just don't push back on it at all. I just don't think that I don't think you want to go down that road. It's going to lead you to a very bad place. But anyway, I wrote an article about this, so I'll put it in the replies, and then I'll have to see everyone next week.
Thanks, Paul.
Thanks for a great space, everyone. Though I'll see you guys later.